The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Racing Form handicapping session presented by the Breeders' Cup for the Friday Breeders' Cup races. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal. Happy to be back with you talking about these races for the Breeders' Cup and DRF. And I'm joined today by two excellent analysts and panelists and guys who I'm super interested to hear their opinion about these four Friday races. We have from the Daily Racing Form our national handicapper. You know him from the fine work he does in terms of video at DRF and, of course, his columns as well. He is Mike Watchmaker. Mike, how are you doing?
Hello, Peter Thomas Fornatal.
Life is good. You excited for this Breeders' Cup?
Very much so. I'm happy to be here at Del Mar. It's a beautiful area, and I'm ready for it.
Beautiful. We also have a man who I've been fortunate enough to spend some time with at this very plant over the years. He is the author of a fantastic handicapping book. One of my most frequently asked questions is, how can I learn more about this game? And I often send them to a book he wrote called Handicapping 101. He is the Southern California handicapper for DRF and so much more. He is Brad Free. Brad, what's going on?
Good morning, Pete. Yeah, what's going on is Breeders' Cup is here at Del Mar for the first time in Breeders' Cup history. So looking forward to Friday and Saturday and unraveling the mystery of these 13 Breeders' Cup races. Should be a lot of fun, and looking forward to this weekend.
Excellent. Well, in this show, we're going to mostly focus on the four Friday Breeders' Cup races. These are part of two very important guaranteed bets lined up here by the Breeders' Cup. There is a guarantee on the late pick six, and there is also a guarantee on these very four pick four races we're going to be talking about. So folks can hopefully take their own information and synthesize some of the knowledge they gain in this session from Brad and Watch, and hopefully have a chance to win their share of the guaranteed money that's going to be on offer in both of these pools. If we have time, we'll try to take some questions at the end. To submit a question, you can use the questions box you see at the bottom of the GoToWebinar screen. Feel free to go ahead and get a jump on that as we go along here. But without further ado, gentlemen, let's move on to race 6 here at Del Mar on Friday. It goes at 2:25 Pacific time, the first Breeders' Cup race. It is the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly Turf. Brad, let's start with you. What's your view on this race?
Well, I basically look back at the history of this race and, to kind of see what has worked in the past. And it's kind of interesting to me that we have 5 European fillies making their U.S. debut in this race. And when you're going a mile on grass as a 2-year-old, it seems like you're playing the Europeans game, and yet there have only been a couple of Europeans that have won this race. Those being Flotilla back in 2012 and Crescilium in 2013. But the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf has by and large been pretty much dominated by local U.S.-based horses, and no trainer has had more success than Chad Brown. I think he has the 2 horses to beat in here. Rushing Falls' win in the Jessamine on October 11th at Keeneland was absolutely sensational. She powered away by more than 3 lengths. I'm not sure what was behind her that day, but from a visual perspective, it was impressive. And if she runs back to that race, I think that she's going to be very tough to beat. But Chad Brown also has another filly named Significant Form. She won the Miss Grillo last time out, and the Miss Grillo has actually produced more Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf winners than any other prep race. So I like the 2 Chad Browns coming into this race. One of them happens to be the favorite, Significant Form. Her price is a lot better, 8-1 on the morning line, 10-1 on Mike Watchmaker's line. Her odds are going to be right in that neighborhood. She should have the jump over Rushing Fall, but when all is said and done, if Rushing Fall runs back to her Keeneland race, that was run on a soft course, by the way, so that's the one potential drawback. We're on firm this weekend at Del Mar, but I think Rushing Fall, if she reproduces that race, it's going to take a very good filly to beat her. There might be some good fillies in here.
There sure appear to be. Watch, where do you stand on this issue of the Europeans sort of underperforming in this race, Chad Brown overperforming? Does that color the way that you're looking at this one at all?
A little bit. First of all, I'm glad you started with Brad in this race because, you can't love all 13 Breeders' Cup races. You just can't. I mean, if you're honest about it. And, and I don't love this race. I don't have a strong opinion in this race. And if their daily racing form has 10-1 in significant form, that's Brad Free's line. Brad did the line for Friday's Breeders' Cup races.
Thank you,
So
Mike.
Blame him. Blame him if it's wrong. But in any event, look, I do think, history has proven that U.S. fillies seem to do better in this race. And why buck that, especially when you don't have a firm opinion in the race? And I'm rushing. The thing that concerns me about Rushing Fall, who I did pick in this race, is she was really pace set up in the Jessamine. The pace was strong. It was contested and it fell apart. And I don't know that there's a tremendous amount of speed in this race. Now, I'm sure the pace will be honest enough. It's a Breeders' Cup race. I mean, I don't think we're going to see, a 25 and 50. But I just don't know that there's a tremendous amount of speed in this race. And I don't know that Rushing Fall is going to be as well set up as she was in the Jessamine. But I still think she's an exciting prospect. Chad Brown has a knack for winning these sorts of races, and I just couldn't look past her. And I actually think, for a filly that's been heavily favored in both of her starts, she was 4-5 in the Jessamine. And if you get 7-2 on her or 3-1 or somewhere in the neighborhood, it might actually be an okay price. For second and third, I went with the 2-8 O'Brien fillies. I prefer September over Happily. Happy's European lines are better than September's, but I have a feeling that September might be better suited to firm turf than Happily is. It seems like Happy's best performance have come on deep turf, which doesn't mean that she precludes her from running well on firm turf. It's just I think September looks like she might be a better filly on firm turf, and she's going to get that, and I think she'll be the better price of the two. And I'm not crazy about significant form. I know that Miss Grillo has been a good prep for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies over the years. And significant form won the Miss Grillo, and I picked significant form fourth in this race only because I was required by the leaders of DRF to make 4 picks in the race. So I wound up picking her fourth, but I really don't like her that much. And to be honest with you, I'm just not crazy about the race.
Fair enough. Brad, before we leave a discussion of this race, I would love to get a quick thought from you about those 2 Aidan O'Brien fillies and your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, back-to-back Group 1 win speaks volumes with regards to Happily, so you can't knock the European form. I'm just surprised that with a Group 1 winning filly from Europe, what do they really have to gain by shipping over here to run in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf, unless, they just feel that she's not going to be a 3-year-old. A lot of times these 2-year-olds with Group 1 form, they put them away for winter. They, just skip the Breeders' Cup and then point for the big European classics. So I respect the form of Happily. Happily is actually my fourth preference in the race. And Mike makes some good points regarding September, who also comes into the race in top form. She finished second by a nose last time out. She finished behind Happily a couple starts in September and August. So at least on form, it appears that Happily is a better horse. But they're both here. They're both on Lasix. And if you're spreading the race, I think that you'd have to definitely consider both those. There's another European. She's really not a European anymore, but I just want to touch on briefly. I thought Capella Temptress, her win in the Natalma in September was terrific. She unleashed a wicked turn of late foot, and the 2-3 finishers behind her returned to validate the form of that race by winning stakes races. It's been 2 months since we've seen Capella Temptress. She might be a better filly now than she was then. She'll have to be to beat this field, but I think she's coming into the race the right way.
And the Natalma has proved a productive prep for this in the past. Some interesting stuff to note there. All right, let's move on to the 7th race. This is the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile Watch. This time we'll start with you.
Well, any discussion of this Dirt Mile has to begin with what you think about More Spirit. And More Spirit's win in the Met Mile was one of the best performances we've seen on dirt this year in North America, if not perhaps the best. And it was certainly the best performance going a mile on dirt in North America this year by a long way. The problem is that More Spirit hasn't raced since then. It's something like 146 or 147 days. And that's a long, long time. And, I know that you know, you're getting to a level now when you're talking about trainers like Bob Baffert. And later on, we're going to talk about John Sadler. You know, guys that can get horses ready off long layoffs to run top efforts. But as a horse player, it just scares the heck out of me, especially when you're talking about a horse who's liable to be the favorite in the race. And for that reason, I took a stand against More Spirit. I did pick him second, only out of respect, but I really like Sharp Azteca in this race. Sharp Azteca has just turned in some monstrous performances of his own this year, and it, you know, as proof of how tremendous More Spirit was the Met Mile, Sharp Azteca was 6 1/4 lengths behind him that day. But you know, Sharp Azteca was brilliant winning the Gulfstream Park Handicap. From a visual sense, it looked like he was an unlucky third in the Godolphin Mile because it looked like the pace was very fast in that race, and it looked like he was brutalized on it. He was second in the Met Mile in his return to the U.S. Notably, they stretched him out to 2 turns in the mile in the 16th Monmouth Cup because with an eye towards this third mile, because this third mile is a 2-turn race, and he had no issue whatsoever. I mean, he crushed that field. Granted, it wasn't a strong field, but I mean, it was a strong performance. And his win in the Kelso was it was as easy a win as you can boast. I mean, he was just tons the best, and he got a 112 buyer figure. And if More Spirit isn't ready for his tip-top race off this very long layoff, I think Sharp Azteca is very, very much the horse here. And I also think he's probably the controlling speed. I mean, he could control this pace, even if he isn't on the front of it. But I mean, I just think he's very solid at the spot.
Before we throw it to Brad, I like Sharp Azteca too, but I did want to ask you your opinion, Mike, sort of about the elephant in the room regarding Sharp Azteca and Jorge Navarro. We've seen the video, and there are some out there who seem to think that maybe one can't get away with the same things at the Breeders' Cup meeting that they might be able to at Philly Park. Does that give you any pause at all regarding Sharp Azteca's chances?
Well, I just sort of address it, and it's something that I think, you know, racing fans have to, you know, deal with individually. But for me, I think it's important that you sometimes have to divorce horse from the people who handle the horse. And you know, I thought the video that involved Jorge Navarro and one of his owners at Monmouth Park was offensive. I mean, it was, as a horse player, I'm sure everyone who's listening to this webinar is familiar with it. I thought it was just incredibly offensive. You know, the blowback that the connections of this horse have gotten is well deserved. And I just decided that I'm a fan of Sharp Azteca, and I'm not a fan of the horse's connections. And you know, I understand what you're alluding to without coming out saying it, Peter. But I mean, you know, I'm sure that this horse has been scrutinized. You know, and I'm sure his performance in the Kelso was scrutinized, and we haven't heard a thing. So you know, I think I'm not concerned. I think the horse, you know, at least in these terms, should be able to run his best race. Before I move on, I do just want to address something about Accelerate, because I wanted to. It's part and parcel of why I like Sharp Azteca so much in this race. I mean, Accelerate comes into this of 2 very good performances at the Del Mar Summer Meet. His first 2 career starts with blinkers, notably. He just crushed his field in the San Diego Handicap, and he was third in the Pacific Classic behind Collected and Arrogate, 2 major players in Saturday's Classic. The thing of it is that Accelerate got a very easy lead in the San Diego, and he beat Donworth, who interestingly is in for a $40,000 tag this week. I can't believe it. I thought Donworth was going to be a superstar early in his career, but now you can have him for $40,000 this week. But in any event, you know, Accelerate's just not going to get the kind of easy lead in this race that he got in the San Diego. And you know, yeah, he was third in the Pacific Classic, but somebody had to be third in that race. I mean, he was a soundly beaten third. He was not a win threat. So I kind of think Accelerate is a horse to play against in this spot.
All right, Brad, what's your view on this year's Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile?
I think Accelerate is the horse to beat. There's no doubt in my mind with regards to that. I do agree with Mike regarding More Spirit. There are a lot of questions whether or not he can reproduce his Met Mile smasher. If he does, this race is over. But Coming out of the Met Mile this spring, More Spirit did not train well in summer at Del Mar, and I'm not sure if it's because he did not like the surface, or maybe he was feeling the effects of a 117 buyer and a 6-length win in the Met Mile. Sometimes horses react negatively when they run off the charts like More Spirit did, and he did not have a very good summer. We're 5 months down the road, and I think if you back More Spirit, you basically have to trust the trainer that he's as good now as he was then. I just can't make that leap of faith. So I'm going to be playing against More Spirit, but I do like Accelerate. He's 3 for 4 at Del Mar. His only loss was a 3rd place finish in the Pacific Classic. I don't think he needs the lead like he did in the San Diego. Certainly that would be a beneficial trip, but I don't see him as a need the lead type horse. Since adding blinkers 2 starts back, he's taken his game to a new level. He's fast enough to be forwardly placed. I agree that Sharp Aztec is the horse to catch, but I think Accelerate's going to be in a great spot right behind the speed, and I think he will be one of the ones to get first run. I think that More Spirit could possibly keep Sharp Aztec company. Gato del Oro will be forwardly placed, and I think Accelerate should be no farther back than maybe 4th position. He's going to be in a great spot to make his move. I think he's the horse to beat, and I'll take every bit of 7-2. There's one long shot in here that I'm intrigued by, just to the outside of Accelerate. Battle of Midway, 3rd in the Kentucky Derby, the runner-up last time out at Remington Park in the Oklahoma Derby, a roughly run race. His only start at Del Mar was a career best performance. So I think that Battle of Midway, he's going to be a little bit overlooked off that runner-up finish in a Grade 3 race and only really one big number to run to. But Battle of Midway, he has a chance to at least outrun his price. But I'm going to take Accelerate on top of Battle of Midway, and I respect the speed of Sharp Aztec. And if this track continues to play, quick and seemingly kind to speed as it was on Wednesday, Sharp Aztec could be very tough to catch.
Great
Brad
stuff.
makes Brad makes a very good point. The track was definitely speed favoring yesterday. There's no question about it.
We've had some questions about the track bias. We had a specific question about the dirt mile, which Brad already answered. But, Mike, I want to give you a chance at the same one. A long shot underneath horse for the dirt mile, somebody wanted. Any additional thoughts there before we move on?
I really don't have one. It would be disingenuous of me to reach and pick some 30-1 shots that I didn't pick on my top 4. So I can't offer one. Sorry.
Fair enough. I like that answer. All right, let's go on to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. This is a race where the European Raiders have had a lot more success over the years. Brad, let's keep it with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they've run this race 10 times, and 8 winners made their last start outside the U.S., including I think 1 or 2 races, at least one that won the Summer Stakes. That was Pluck back in 2010. But Europeans have by and large kind of dominated this race. And not that I have to pick a European in this race, but when you look at the US-based 2-year-old grass horses, I'm kind of left wanting. I really don't see anybody that I'm enthused about, with the possible exception of Snapper Sinclair, a 15-1 shot that I will be using. But I ended up settling on a couple of Europeans, James Garfield on top of Massar, one of I think the second and the favorite and maybe the 3rd choice. They both appear to be in good form, good connections. They have closing styles that I think will suit this particular turf course. And I'm just taking a shot that the Europeans are better than the American horses. But as I said, I think that Snapper Sinclair is a horse that could definitely slip through the cracks. He has a tactical running style. He can finish. We haven't seen him in a couple months, so who knows how much progression he has made since early September. At that big price, I'll be definitely using Snapper Sinclair. But my 1-2s, James Garfield, Frankie Dettori aboard, and Massar as my second selection.
Mike, what do you think of Brad's hypothesis that this race could once again be run as a benefit for the Europeans?
Well, I think when these races were created, they were created as a benefit to the Europeans. I mean, they were basically just gifts to enhance and encourage greater European participation in the Breeders' Cup. I mean, that's just the way it is. So, okay, so we have these races, and I see this similar to the way Brad does. I mean, The U.S. Base 2-year-old male turf horses do absolutely nothing for me, and I picked 4 Europeans in this race. But my top European pick is one that Brad didn't mention, and I like Mendelssohn in here. Yeah, I know Mendelssohn was 50-1 when he finished second in the Group 1 Dewhurst last time out, but he showed dramatic improvement with blinkers on. And he finished second to his stablemate, U.S. Navy Flag, who's going to try dirt in the Juvenile on Saturday. U.S. Navy Flag began the year as something of a second stringer, but he's put together quite a win streak, and he's a lot better than he was originally considered to be. And Mendelssohn was game finishing second to him that day. And with Aidan O'Brien's horses, it seems like, he gives them time, but once they really start to get good, then they string good races together. I mean, it could be any number of good performances together. So he's patient, but when they get good, when they turn the corner, then they start putting big races together. And I think Mendelssohn's probably turned the corner. Certainly the post doesn't hurt at all because it's not a great big run to the first turn. So we'll be able to work out a nice trip from the rail. And I think Mendelssohn is a very dangerous player in this race. I picked Massar second. His Euro lines are good. Notice that he did finish third in 2 of his last 3 starts behind, happily in September, 2 Aidan O'Brien trained 2-year-old fillies that we discussed earlier in the Juvenile Fillies Turf. Most recently, the connections of Massar stated that the ground was bottomless in his last start and that he really didn't like it. And so you could, if you buy that explanation, you could make the case that Massar finished a close third in that race purely on class, and he might do a lot better on the firmer footing here. I think Beckford third in this spot. He didn't fire as the favorite in the Group 1 Middle Park in his last start, a race won by U.S. Navy Flag. I think he's capable of better than that, and his prior form was good. I'm just hoping he's not, as they like to say over there, over the top, and he just turned it a dud last time out and is able to return to his better form. And I picked James Garfield fourth. Now, I'm a little bit concerned about James Garfield. His paper looks very good, but I'm not sure that he really wants this 1 mile distance. It looked like his races, 2 or 3 starts battling 7 furlongs, were a little bit of a struggle for him distance-wise, and now he's got to go a mile. And I know that there's the old saw that European horses, who establish what their distance is over there, come here and can go much longer. I understand all of that, and there's probably a lot of truth to that. But with horses like Mendelssohn and Massar, and to a lesser extent Beckford, they've got proven performances at a mile or 7 furlongs, whereas I'm not quite sure about James Garfield in the distance.
Fair enough. I have a question for you, Mike, just to follow up about Mendelssohn. Meeting like the Breeders' Cup, folks sometimes overthink things, and I may be guilty of that here. But just looking at this horse and knowing his pedigree, amazing pedigree for dirt, obviously Beholder's little brother, and knowing how valuable this horse would be with even a third somehow on the dirt, does it give any pause or indication of unreadiness that they've chosen the turf race instead of the dirt for Mendelssohn?
I actually look at it the other way. I think what they're demonstrating here by running U.S. Navy Flag on the dirt and keeping Mendelssohn on the turf is that they actually have big hopes for Mendelssohn next year in the European Classics. So I see it completely the other way. And I understand the pedigree. I get that angle. But I think, they decided to throw U.S. Navy Flag to the wolves and keep Mendelssohn on what is his comfortable service, because I think they probably think more of him.
That makes sense. And also U.S. Navy Flag, you just see in the paper how tough of a horse he is, the idea that the dirt wouldn't take anything out of him and it wouldn't hurt his value one bit to flop. Maybe it, would hurt Mendelssohn, but you make a compelling case there. Let's move on to
one other point, Peter, about U.S. Navy Flag. He's already had 10 starts this year. The juvenile is going to be his 11th start. I like the fact that Aidan O'Brien likes to run his horses. I mean, he's not afraid of racing them, but that is a whole lot of starts for a 2-year-old, even for that barn. And that tells me, it sort of reinforces my suspicion that he is at heart still a second stringer, no matter how hot he's gotten lately.
All right, let's go on to this Breeders' Cup Distaff. Really interesting race from a sporting point of view, potentially very interesting race from a betting point of view as well. Watch, how much are you looking forward to watching and or betting this one?
Both, and highly. I think it's a good betting race because I do think Stellar Win will be the favorite in here, and while I respect her immensely, I just don't like the near 100-day layoff she brings into this race. And I also have a slight gnawing question in my mind of whether she's as good this year as she was in previous campaigns. Her form, she's 3 for 3 this year. All 3 races were in Grade 1 events, but she beat Vale Dory in 2 of those races. And I'm not knocking Vale Dory. She's honest, but, it's not like she was beating Beholder like Stellar Win did last year. I wonder about, the layoff concerns me for the reasons expressed earlier with more spirit. And I also just have this nagging, gnawing feeling that she might not be quite as good this year as she was last year. To me, this race is all about pace. And I just think Paradise Woods is as loose as can be in here. I know that Champagne Room has a little bit early speed, but unless they go absolutely insane and use Champagne Room as a sacrificial lamb for some other horses of this race, she's just not quick enough under normal circumstances to keep up with Paradise Woods early. And I just think, Paradise Woods, she got hooked in that ridiculous speed duel in the Kentucky Oaks, and she went to her face at the start with Torrey Pine. But when she got loose in the Santa Anita Oaks, she won by almost 12 lengths, beating Abel Tasman, who went on to win 3 Grade 1 races and who's also in this race. You could see exactly what she went on to do after Paradise Woods manhandled her that day with a 107 buyer figure. And she got completely loose last time out in Zenyatta, which was a stroll in the park for her, with another big buyer figure. This Paradise Woods airs when she gets loose early, and she runs fast when she gets loose early. And I think she's going to get loose early in this race, barring a bad start. And I think she takes this group wire to wire. And I think the other 3-year-old in the race, Elate, is the main danger. Elate got really, really good over the summer at Saratoga. I loved her in the Alabama. One of the last tickets I cashed. But 3 starts back, she lost a head decision to Abel Tasman in the Coach Club American Oaks. She easily could have been placed first in that race. Abel Tasman really tightened it up on her late in the stretch, and there was only a head apart. And I don't think anyone could have. There was an inquiry and an objection. I don't think anyone would have disputed the call if Abel Tasman was DQ'd that day and Elate was placed first. And then Elate just galloped in the Alabama, and then she crushed a bad field of older horses in the Beldame. She's gotten really good, but she has no pace advantage. Paradise Woods is going to be loose, and Elate is a horse that stalks or closes, and she's going to be a little bit up against it from a pace standpoint. And then there's Forever Unbridled, she just runs good race after good race. She's a high class mare. Songbird had everything her own way in the personal incident. Yeah, maybe Songbird wasn't this year the Songbird that we were used to in previous years, but despite being completely up against it pace-wise, Forever Unbridled still beat Songbird in the personal incident. She's logical, but I'm just looking for Paradise Woods to go wire to wire.
All right, we had a question about Forever Unbridled that came in, and Brad, I'll let you field this one before we get your general thoughts on the race. Forever Unbridled almost won this race last year, looks better this year. Why 9-2 morning line? I think she might be a single, one of our viewers says. Brad, what do you make of that idea, and what do you think of this race in general?
Well, I think that Forever Unbridled is definitely a contender. There's no doubt about it. She's 4-1 on the morning line. She's won 7 races at 7 different racetracks, so there's no reason why she won't like Del Mar. She's a good filly in good form. She had a late start to her campaign due to an injury, but they took their time with her, and they're being rewarded right now. She is a contender in this race. However, I think that Mike touched on the handicapping theme of the race, and that is horses like Forever Unbridled and Abel Tasman. They are at the mercy of a pace scenario that is likely to unfold at a relatively tepid clip. Paradise Woods will set the pace. And if she's loose, she could be gone. I don't think she's going to be loose per se, because Stellar Wind has enough speed to be forwardly placed. They learned that last year when they were running against Beholder. They chased Beholder in the Vanity Mile in early June, and in the next two starts against Beholder, jockey Victor Espinoza and John Sadler realized that if they allow Beholder to get out there and lollygag on the front end, Stellar Wind is just going to finish second. So they decided at that point, let's take it to her early. Let's put Stellar Wind into the race. What happened? She won by a half, and she won by a neck over one of the better fillies or mares that we've seen in some time, Beholder. Now, Beholder, Mike is concerned regarding whether or not she is as good this year as she was last year. It's a valid concern. If you're waiting for Stellar Wind to blow away a field and win by open lengths, it's going to be a long wait. She's not the type of filly who does anything more than is necessary in the mornings in workouts, in the races in the afternoon. Vale Dory is just a good, I think she's a grade 1 winner, but she's more like a grade 2 caliber mare. And Stellar Wind defeated her by only a neck in her last two starts. But as I said, the Stellar Wind is not going to put a horse away and draw off from the field. She'll do only what is required. She has enough speed to keep Paradise Woods in her sights. And I think when all is said and done, I think that Stellar Wind can wear down Paradise Woods. But having said that, I think the race is a parade. I think they're going to go slow all the way around. I think Stellar Wind is the most likely winner. I think Paradise Woods is the second most likely winner. And I think that actually Champagne Room, with her forwardly placed running style, has a chance to maybe slip into the trifecta at a big, big price. As for the closers, I'm going to have to take a stand against them. Forever Unbridled and Abel Tasman, and even Elate, I know she is doing well. She's training great. Her form is solid. But I'm a little bit concerned about the pace scenario with her. She'll have to rally from behind, and I'm not sure that style will be effective in a Breeders' Cup distaff that has really only one true front runner and maybe one true presser in Stellar Wind, and I think that's the race. Stellar Wind on top of Paradise Woods.
I want to ask a question of both of you about Abel Tasman. This is just a theory, not anything based on news. But do you think there's some chance that Mike Smith, after having made these visually premature moves in the last two races, might ride Abel Tasman differently? Is it possible, now that she's been in the Baffert barn for longer, that she'll get farther away from the closing running style she seemed to develop under Callahan and more towards the style of a typical Baffert horse, which is more to sit and try to sit closer and grind and try to finish? Could there be anything to that idea, Brad?
No, I don't think so, because I think both Baffert and Smith realized that, what got Abel Tasman to this level right now is allowing her to drop out and make a run. And if you make the run too early, they got away with it in the Coaching Club American Oaks and were able to pin a head decision over a late, but it backfired in the Cotillion. Abel Tasman is a filly that drops out. They need to time her run until late in the race and just hope that she gets there. So I would be surprised to see her up close to the lead. She just drops out, makes a run. That is her style, and she needs to wait to make her run, not in the middle of the race like she did last time, finishing second in the Cotillion. So I think that we're going to see Abel Tasman employ the same type running style that has allowed her to win, 6 of her 10 starts and 4 grade 1s.
That makes perfect sense. I'm convinced. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Abel Tasman made a wild early move in the Coaching Club American Oaks. She made it stand up, and she made a wild early move in the Cotillion too. The problem is that she made that move in the Cotillion on the inside, and the rail, as is often the case at Parks, was dead that day. She was on the wrong part of the racetrack, and she ran better in the Cotillion than it looks on paper. That said, I have a theory on Abel Tasman, and that is I don't think she's as good at a mile and 1/8 as she is at shorter distances. I know she won the Kentucky Oaks at a mile and 1/8, and I know she won the Coaching Club American Oaks at a mile and 1/8. There were also 2 of her weaker buyer figures. I mean, the Kentucky Oaks was only a 92 buyer, and the Coaching Club American Oaks was only a 92 buyer. Meanwhile, she got a 95 at a mile and mile 16 Cotillion while running on the dead rail. She got a 99 in the 1 mile Acorn. She got a 94 when second to Unique Bell in the mile of 60 San Isabel. I have a sneaking suspicion that Abel Tasman is especially against this kind of field going to find the distance wanting. I think she's a little bit in trouble with this distance. I think at heart she's really a miler.
Can I just follow up on something that Mike just mentioned regarding her? Perhaps she's better at a shorter distance. I think that if that's right, and I'm not disagreeing with it, but it could have something to do with the pace scenario. In shorter races, the pace generally comes up a lot quicker than it does in longer races. And I think that Abel Tasman is kind of pace dependent. And the longer they go, as far as distance goes, the more likely it is that the race will unfold at a soft pace. So I think that, it looks like on paper, maybe Mike has a valid point, but I think you have to add the pace analysis along with that. Shorter races tend to unfold at a faster clip, and that benefits closers such as Abel Tasman.
That's excellent analysis, and I do think those things often can go hand in hand for that reason. We've had a lot of questions come in about Del Mar as a track in terms of biases that occasionally occur, but also in terms of just post positions and which ones might be problematic, which ones might be beneficial. I'm not sure the best way to ask the question, but Brad, I'll just say it like this. Are there any particular, what you might call configuration or post position biases that you're going to be factoring in to your analysis of these 4 Friday Breeders' Cup races?
Well, I mean, if you draw outside in a 2-turn race, you're definitely compromised, but it does not have to be a deal breaker. We've seen plenty of good horses win Breeders' Cup races from the outside. Caraconte won the Breeders' Cup Mile 3 years ago from post 14. The Half Bridled won the Juvenile Fillies a few years ago, breaking from virtually the parking lot. Lure way back in 1993. So I think the post position is kind of an overrated or overanalyzed assessment. I think you just have to use common sense. If you're looking at, maybe backing a horse at a short price and the horse is drawn outside, maybe you want to, reduce your enthusiasm a little bit. But from a common sense standpoint, you don't want to be outside. And when you're going short, I don't think you want to be down on the inside. I think that Dre Fong in the sprint, post 2 is a potentially compromising post for him. But like I said, it doesn't have to be the reason. If he gets beat, that does not necessarily have to be the reason, but it's something to at least consider. As far as the main track and the profile goes, I would imagine that this racetrack will probably play the same today, tomorrow, and Saturday as it played on Wednesday. The weather is cool. We've had cloud cover, and if it plays like it did on Wednesday, I think we're going to see a lot of forwardly placed horses do very well in Breeders' Cup races. This grass course, I think it's going to be fair. We had a couple of, front-running winner on Wednesday, but the turf rails were at 30 feet, and it was kind of a bad race. Some of the grass races on Wednesday were a little bit suspect in terms of quality, but I think that if you like a deep closer on the grass course, you're in pretty good shape. The course will not get you beat. So you can come from behind on grass. I think that on the main track, you want to be forwardly placed. As far as post position goes, I would just use common sense. If it's a sprint and you're down inside, you might want to, take a second look. And if it's a route and you're down on the outside, you also might want to take a second look.
I'm not sure if Brad left any meat on the bone of that question with such a thorough answer, but Mike, knowing your expertise, particularly when it comes to matters such as track bias, I do want you to weigh in on it.
Well, in terms of the main track yesterday, like I said earlier, it was definitely speed favoring. And it also, and Brad could probably speak better to this, but it seemed to me it was a tighter surface than it was over the summer because we saw some bad horses set some brutally fast fractions in a sprint race early in the card. I mean, really fast fractions. So it didn't seem like we saw fractions like that at any point during the Del Mar meet over the summer. So I suspect the track is tighter than it was, and I think that's going to be good news for maybe some horses that you might have wondered about if they like the surface. I'm alluding to Arrogate, of course, but I don't know at this point what they could do to the racetrack to change it. And I don't know if they would do anything to the racetrack to change it. But it did seem definitely tilted towards speed. As for the turf, I don't know how it works here, Brad, but back east, when you've got the rails up and all of a sudden they drop the rails and now they've opened up the inside paths, those inside paths just become gold. Now, I mean, this is not a turf course that's seen a lot of racing, so it might not have that sort of effect this time. But say, for example, at Saratoga, when they have the rails out for much of the meet, and all of a sudden they drop the rails towards the end of the meet. The inside just becomes by far the best part of the course. But yesterday was opening day. It was the first day of racing back on it. I don't know that you'll get that same effect with this course.
You did have a specific question about the rail settings, Brad. If you want to speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, the rails are going to be down on Friday and Saturday. They're going to open up this course, and it'll be as wide as it possibly can be. But for yesterday when the rails were at 30 feet, they're trying to protect the turf course. I think with regards to the inside being good, I think maybe some of that is because of the when you save ground in a grass race, that's a good spot to be in. I mean, we see Corey Nakatani doing it out here time and time again in California, saving ground inside and then finding a seam and then blasting home. So I think that with the rails down this weekend, I think we're going to have a fair course. And I think we're going to see some blast home closers win some of these grass races.
Lady Aurelia just walked out on the turf course. Actually, they cut away from her, but she's out there right now, and seeing her made me think of those, what I took to be rather strange quotes by Wesley Ward, who made it sound like the Del Mar turf course typically favors closers. Is that a trend that I've missed over the years, Brad? What was Wesley getting at with that quote?
Well, that's just not true, especially with regards to turf sprints. 1/4 of the turf sprints this summer were won by horses that race gate to wire. But with the rails down, they had 5 grass sprints, and 4 of them were won by closers. I really don't think that when you're talking about a 5 furlong turf sprint, I don't think that there is you can put your finger on a course profile and say that this horse is favored by the way this grass course plays. Lady Aurelia can win the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint if she breaks well and if she doesn't get shuffled back, and if the pace, doesn't get wickedly fast. If it does, then I think you're going to be looking at somebody coming from off the pace. Maybe a Disco Partner who's at 5 furlongs. It's a shorter distance than he wants, but he'll be finishing. So whoever said that with regards to course profile, that it favors one style over another, I would kind of kindly disagree. I think the best horses are winning the races most of the time. I will say this about grass turf sprints at Del Mar: they tend to be extremely chaotic. This grass course has been in for more than 3 years now, and the win percentage of favorites in turf sprints is only 24%. And this has been going on since for more than 3 years. The best horse does not always win a grass sprint because there tends to be a whole lot of early trouble, and if you get checked once in a turf sprint at Del Mar, chances are that trouble is going to be exacerbated. You're going to end up getting shuffled back. So there's a lot of trouble that happens in a turf sprint at Del Mar. I think that 24% win rate of favorites, which is about 50% less than the historical norm, I think there's something to that. I think that turf sprints at Del Mar tend to be a little bit more unpredictable than other types of races.
We are just about out of time. We did have a question about other races on the Friday card. Do either of you have anything you're excited about betting in the first half of the undercard of Breeders' Cup Friday, keeping in mind that we've got this guaranteed pick 6 and guaranteed pick 4 late in the card, but of course we got a full card of racing as well. Mike, do you have anything there?
No, I think this is Brad's wheelhouse right here. So I think Brad should handle this.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's go to Calbreds then. We'll talk about a Calbred filly. Her name is Pulpit Rider. She runs in race number 4. It's the Golden State Juvenile Fillies, 2-year-old fillies bred in California, going 7 furlongs. And Pulpit Rider, her second career start was at Del Mar in late August, and she won by more than 8 lengths. It was a powerful victory by a daughter of Lucky Pulpit, who has enough tactical speed to be up close. We know she likes the surface. She looks like she took a step backward in her subsequent start, a race that she won, but it was not nearly as impressive as her Del Mar race. I think that they got just what they were looking for in that easy allowance win. She's stretching out to 7 furlongs, and I think that's going to be perfect for Pulpit Rider, who has a tactical advantage over her main rivals, those being Isme Lucky and also Spice Perfection to her outside is going to actually impact the pace. But I like Pulpit Rider. She's 6-1 in race number 4.
Good stuff. All right, we are out of time. I want to thank both Mike Watchmaker and Brad Free for taking time out and sharing so many interesting thoughts on this Breeders' Cup Friday card. Remember to get involved in the Pick 6, get involved in this late Pick 4, and thank you so much to everybody for tuning in and spending some time with us. If you want to catch the replay, you can go to drf.com/YouTube. Lots of great content produced by DRF on there. Thanks again to our sponsor, the Breeders' Cup, for helping us put on these shows. We'll have another tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel, with handicapping author and professional player Mike Maloney joining us for tomorrow's show. Be fun to hear what he has to say about these Saturday races. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal, and you've been watching content produced by DRF.com.